Retirement planning is as much about physical and mental well-being as it is about finances. Understanding and preparing for healthcare costs is crucial for a comfortable retirement. Retirees may face substantial healthcare costs, including expenses not covered by Medicare, such as medication and dental services. It's essential to recognize that while Medicare covers some areas, it doesn't cover everything, particularly outpatient services and prescription drugs. Factoring in Medicare's limitations, it's important to consider supplemental insurance plans, especially for long-term care needs like assistance with daily living activities. Health status significantly impacts retirement healthcare costs. Chronic conditions or lifestyle choices can increase these expenses, making it crucial to maintain physical health through regular exercise, reducing healthcare costs, and enhancing life quality. Mental well-being is equally important. Activities that keep you socially active, engaged in hobbies, and considering mental health services contribute to a fulfilling retirement. Budgeting for healthcare is essential, taking into account health status, location, and income level. A well-rounded approach ensures you're prepared not just financially, but also for maintaining your health and wellness in retirement.
Fritz, before we went live, you were talking about going beyond the numbers. Like, it's clear that for retirement planning, people are going to look at the numbers. There's a tendency to look at the spreadsheet. But I saw you have a blog post that there's a lot more that goes on beyond the numbers that one has to think about. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, really the thing, it's interesting because we're talking about health and insurance and wellness. So my brain was going there. So let me touch on that, but I can weave it into the question. I think what you need to think about is all the non-financial benefits you're getting from your work, relationships, sense of identity, purpose, challenge, etc. And find ways to replace those, just like you're trying to find ways to replace your paycheck. That's important. As you age, I really encourage people to make one of those things, one of your purposes, to focus on longevity and fitness. And that's where I'm tying the two together. I'm 60 years old. I've never been in better shape in my life. And what I've done is I lost my structure, right? When I left my job, structure goes away on the day you retire, 100% unstructured. So I've added some structure into my day by intentionally carving out scheduled time on my calendar where I work out. And I don't just run. I'm doing running. I'm doing weights. I'm doing aerobic. I'm doing long distance hiking where it's long, slow. If you read Dr. Peter Attia, Outlive, I know Roger's a fan. He and I've talked. Great book. And it talks about your life. You will naturally lose your cardio ability. Your muscle mass will shrink, but it doesn't have to shrink at the same pace as everybody else. You can avoid it by really being intentional and focusing on it. So making that one of your really big goals, it has tremendous payback. I feel great now. And I know I'm doing everything I can to extend my longevity to the extent possible. So it kills multiple birds with one stone. It's really helpful in retirement.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, healthcare, is that the specter for retirees? Because it seems like the cost of healthcare just continues to rise.
Yeah, let me touch on that real quick, and then we move on to somebody else. But I'm 60, right? I've been retired 5 years, almost 6. I'm paying for private insurance. It's expensive, right? Very expensive, and I've got a pension, so I don't get any ACA subsidies. So we're paying the full share. No big deal. We built it into our numbers when we were planning for retirement, thinking what our life was going to be, deciding if we could make it. If you bake it into your numbers and you have conservative estimates, ultimately, it doesn't become a huge anxiety inducer because you've built it into your numbers and you can afford it. So yes, it's a huge issue for everybody. But all I would say is what that says to the people that haven't yet retired is make sure you factored it in and you're using realistic estimates as you're thinking about what your healthcare expenses are going to be. It's a major expense. You've got to get it right. In our case, we estimated a little bit high to be safe. So now we don't have the anxiety because we know we've got it covered in our numbers.
Mm-hmm. So estimate a little bit more aggressively so that you can come in shy.
Yep.
Roger, how do you incorporate healthcare cost planning into your retirement advice?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge here we're talking to essentially 3 different constituencies when we think about retirement. We have, out of a lot of hard work and maybe some good luck, overfunded, people that have ample assets to cover life and deal with it. And they're dealing with issues. They have issues too. But then we're dealing with probably another segment, another contingency that is constrained. Oh, maybe they have enough or maybe they don't. And then from a societal standpoint, the largest contingent, which is they're probably underfunded. And the choice set is a lot smaller. So I think it's important to acknowledge that there's not one homogeneous group of people. I mean, like Fritz, we factor in the cost of health insurance, the private insurance, as well as transitioning to Medicare and having Medigap insurance. In our optimization pillar, we decide whether we're solving for ACA subsidies. So it's just part of the planning of a base great life. I do want to say on the non-financial stuff, if that's okay, Andy, the way that we approach it with clients and on the podcast and in our club is I'm a process guy. There are 4 pillars to the non-financial aspects of life. The number one is energy. You got to work to build energy so you can actually show up to your life. And that's moving, eating, sleeping, etc. And you have to nurture mindset, which is the second one, which is it can be challenging as you get older to continually to have a growth mindset. I think my friend Dan Miller wrote 48 Days of the Book You Love. I'm going down to visit him next week. He's in his mid 70s and he's diagnosed with cancer. He has maybe 3 months to live. So I'm going down to spend some time with him. In his revealing it to me, he's still focusing on what does this make possible in my life? So I think mindset, that second pillar, is critical. The third one is your passions. Work gives us purpose, but when we leave work, we need to have passions in our life. And then lastly, relationships. Those 4 pillars, I think, are a good framing for the intentionality that Fritz is taking that I think we all should take.
I'm so sorry to hear that. I didn't know that about Dan.
Yeah, he is an amazing man.
Colleen, what numbers should we use for the assumptions? And then does one have to think about Medicare and its limitations?
Yeah, Andy, I would say it's really important for people to kind of think through their own health situation, how long their parents lived, as well as their spouse or partner, right? So I do think, while I completely agree, there's not like a one size fits all, and the numbers don't tell the whole story. We do kind of view it as guardrails of, thinking through how long do you think you're going to live? How have your parents or grandparents maybe have they had cancer? Or did you have a history of heart problems or things like that? So I do think it's important to have realistic expectations, like helping like how long are you planning for? You might plan to 100, but if you realistically only think you're living to 80, right, the amount you can spend will be different. How you think about insurance will be different. So I think all that factors into running the numbers so that people can have peace of mind. So I would say definitely consider, if possible, having a supplement to Medicare, right? So just from personal experience, both of my parents passed away of cancer. And I think what people don't realize is you really have to pay attention to like what the cost could be. So, I would say if my mom did not have such great insurance and my dad was a big fan of overfunding as far as insurance goes, we could have, she maybe would have had to sell her house, right? Or, other properties and things that she has. So I think it's really important for people to factor that type of thing in, is when you think about your plan, like maybe you do have assets that you're having in reserve. Okay, if I get sick, I can always sell my vacation home. I could sell my rental property, right? So I think there's like so much to it, is like you really have to factor all of the pieces of the puzzle in to like a holistic plan, and then be flexible, right? Because, obviously things are not always going to go as planned, and this has to be something that's addressed every year, but at least there's a plan there. Like I would kind of joke with my mom, you can spend money because you have assets that you can sell in the future. So I think helping people realize, have a plan, make sure you have good insurance that you're comfortable with for the amount of time you think you will likely be here, and then enjoy your life and relax because you have reserves in the background.
And any thoughts on effective ways to prepare for unexpected healthcare costs in retirement?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because, again, lately I've really been focusing on the Gen Z millennial population. And one of my top 5 risks for people in their 20s and 30s is being underinsured, right? So it may be more health insurance and not long-term care insurance, and more like make sure you have rental insurance because pipes burst and roommates forget to lock the door, so you don't want your laptop gone. But the way I thought about it personally, because I'm also in this sort of transition phase, right? I don't have my paycheck anymore. I'm on boards and getting income there. I've got a book and speaking. But for me, it really is about making sure I have health insurance that's robust, and I'm overinsured as well and paying for it, and that makes me sleep well at night. But also thinking about what will derail my plan, right? What will blow me up? And it's looking at long-term care potentially. And so, I don't sell any of these products. This is not what I do for a living. I'm not an advisor on insurance or long-term care, but to me, it was thinking about, and this is back to my portfolio manager days, right? How do I take the tails off, right? I don't care. The upside tails are great, but the downside tail, right? What would really derail me? And how do I think about mitigating that in a way that doesn't absolutely destroy my portfolio or my ability to let my assets grow effectively? So it really was trying to figure out the sweet spot of that tail risk hedging, which is, again, in my husband's case, right, buying, I think it was 5 years or 7 years of long-term care, inflation adjusted, that if we don't use it, goes back into the estate, right? Or we can tap into it if we decide we've run out of money and need it. But there was a whole lot of research done on what kinds of products would give us peace of mind for tail risk hedging, and also make us feel like we were not, throwing money away on a policy we hope we don't need. And frankly, our own family histories would tell us are not likely outcomes, but who knows?
Yeah, my understanding is that my assumption is that those types of policies are very expensive, but it's interesting to hear you talk about that the premiums that you're paying in would go back into the estate if unused. Well,
this is a very technical topic and I'm not an expert, but there are a lot of different policies out there. So do your homework is what I would say.
Yes. a lot of homework when it comes to insurance and trying to understand the fine print. Yep. With that, let's bring it home. We're going to go to our final segment.